Hey guys, so in today's video I'm going to do a longer range MPG test on my brand new, literally I just drove off the dealer's lot about a half hour ago, but this is my brand new 24 GMC Sierra 2500. This has the gasser, the 6.6 liter gas engine with the 10-speed Allison transmission. And so I thought it'd be interesting. I've got about 540 miles to go to get back home. And so I thought it'd be interesting to see how the truck does on a longer range MPG test like that. Now, obviously the engine's not broken in. I mean, literally it has 20 miles on the engine right now. And so it's probably not going to perform as well in today's test compared to once the engine's broken in. But I still thought it'd be kind of interesting. I don't do a lot of long-range trips, especially unladen in the truck, and so I thought I'd take advantage of this opportunity. Now let me go over the parameters for the test today so that we're all on the same page. So like I said, I've got about 540 miles, and then as far as the speeds, you know, the whole trip is going to be all interstate driving, and I anticipate the speed's going to be, you know, 65, 70, 75 the whole way, depending on where I'm at. So I'm gonna set it to whatever the speed limit is. You know, right now it's 75, and so we're going 75. I will use the adaptive cruise control if it's less trafficy, you know, pretty wide open. And then if it starts to get a little more trafficy, I'll probably turn that off and just try to maintain the speed as best I can manually. Then as far as the fuel goes, the dealership of course filled up the tank before I left, and it's a 36-gallon fuel tank. I don't believe they did a double-click fill when they filled up the tank, meaning I think they just, you know, filled up the tank, and when the pump clicked the first time and shut off, I think that was it. So that's what I plan to do when I need to refuel. I'll also just do a single click, and I know it's probably more accurate to try to fill it up with a double click, but we're doing a longer range here, and so I don't think it's going to make that much of a difference for this test. Of course, I'll look at the computer's MPG and then calculate it against me manually when I fill up the fuel tank. And I'll just mention that you might be seeing these videos out of chronological order. I might publish them a little bit out of order, but for those who are subscribed to my channel, you know that I am in the process of selling my Ram 3500, my 2021 Ram 3500 dually, with of course the Cummins 6.7 liter. And so that is the truck that I've been driving for the last about 2.5 years approximately, and then, you know, for the first time have sat in this 2024 GMC Sierra 2500, so it's a 3/4 ton and a gasser. So I thought it'd be kind of interesting to just give you some initial impressions after, you know, sitting in here for the first time and, you know, driving along the interstate for the first time. You know, what stands out to me. So first biggest thing I'll mention is the visibility out the front windshield. It seems like I've got a lot more height in the GMC here in the Sierra compared to in my 21 Ram 3500, which is kind of interesting because before the Ram I had a 2019 Silverado 3500 dually, so that's the previous generation of truck compared to this 24. But I remember in that truck it seemed like my visibility was shorter looking out the front windshield, so something clearly is different on this next generation of trucks. But I mean, it just seems like the height on the windshield is a lot taller. I can just see a lot more in front of me here, and I'd say just a little bit more on the sides with the windows here. The visibility is really good with the mirrors and everything. I remember on my 2019 Silverado, it had the old style mirrors with the 2 arms going out on each side, which I remember kind of constricted your visibility just a little bit, whereas these newer mirrors on this next generation, we're just having 1 post that attaches them on each side. You do get a lot more visibility there on the mirrors. So I like that a lot. In terms of the ride quality, you know, I'm unladen right now, so there's no weight. This is a 3/4 ton truck versus my Ram 3500, which is a 1 ton and a dually. So if I had to compare just initially what it feels like driving down the highway, you know, surprisingly, I'm gonna say I don't notice a drastic difference. I mean, obviously this feels a little bit lighter, a little bit more nimble here in the 3/4 ton, and it should be because it's lighter. It doesn't have dual rear wheels in the back. The suspension, you know, shouldn't be as stiff because the payload is not as much. but I can't say it's a drastic, night and day difference between the two. So the actual ride differences, in my opinion, is not that much. And then one other difference that I'll mention right off the bat, this might seem kind of random, but when you're used to riding in a certain truck and used to how it feels, and then you step in a different truck, some things just stand out to you. And one thing that I'll mention is my left foot, where it rests, there's not really a dead pedal. It's just kind of I guess the wheel well, the front wheel well that it's resting on, more or less. And I'm a pretty tall guy. I'm 6'2" and 5/8 to be exact. And so I got fairly long legs, and my left leg, I feel like in the Ram, it's got a little bit more room for my left leg when I'm in a pretty similar seating position, I would say. Whereas in here, I'm noticing my left leg is, I feel like the hump there for that wheel well is protruding a little bit more than it does in the Ram. Pretty minor deal, you can just put your foot to the side. But there's something that stood out to me initially. Okay guys, I'm just gonna interrupt the video real quick. When I got back home, I later realized there actually is a dead pedal. I thought I was just feeling the hump for the wheel well, but you can see there actually is a true dead pedal. And I really don't have this on my Ram 3500 that I was coming from. And so this is what my left foot was resting on. Now you can see this dead pedal is pretty much, maybe 1.5 inches, 2 inches behind the brake pedal there. But I would say it's actually maybe 1 inch forward of the position of the gas pedal, at least 1 inch. And so this is what I was feeling. It basically just protrudes out more than I was used to. After driving the truck for a couple weeks, I've gotten used to this with my left foot, but in my opinion, I would prefer this to be pushed back maybe another 2 inches, just for my seating position and my height. Okay, back to the video. And I mean, I've got plenty of leg room. I can move the seat back further, but then my arms, I feel like I'm having to reach further and lean forward to reach things. So that's just a small difference, not a big deal, but thought I'd mention it while it's fresh on my mind. Then in terms of the powertrain, the engine, how everything's shifting, how it feels, I haven't even put 100 miles yet on the truck, and so I don't want to make too many observations on that yet. I want to get a better sense for how it feels, and on the highway, I would imagine that I'm going to be pretty much staying in one of the top gears. I'll have to figure out how to get the gears to display on the screen, because I'm not as familiar with the interface yet here. But I would imagine I'm probably in 9th or 10th gear most of the way on my trip. But so far, obviously it's shifting smoothly. Haven't noticed anything there that stands out. And I'm gonna get the engine broken in before I push it and do anything like 0 to 60 runs or anything like that. But so far it feels very smooth. Now it's a pretty windy day. I don't know if you can tell on the audio, but I can hear the wind buffeting up against the truck. And so as far as noise level, if I were to compare what I'm accustomed to in the Ram 3500 versus here in the 24 Sierra 3/4 ton, I would say it sounds to me about the same. And again, that's pretty subjective. I haven't pulled out a dB meter or anything like that, but it sounds to be about the same. And maybe in the future I can get a dB meter and actually test between the two and see if there is a discernible difference there. Now this is a really small detail, guys, but it is something that I'm noticing, and that is the sound of the blinker. In other words, every time you tap the blinker stock, up or down, the sound, that clicking sound, for me is a lot softer here in the GMC and the Sierra compared to the Ram 3500. So there's been a few times where I've had to really listen for it and look on the display to know that it's actually, that I did tap it, right? So I'm not sure what's going on there, if there's a way to change that and make it a little bit louder, but it definitely seems like it's softer, at least when you're on the interstate. Again, it is pretty windy out today, so maybe it's a little bit noisier here in the cab than normal, but just a little detail that I've noticed. And like I said, I'm gonna be using the cruise control pretty much the whole way there as much as I can, and this one does have adaptive cruise control. So I thought I'd just point out a difference in the way that the GM product works there compared to the Ram. In the Ram, it's almost like they've separated the normal static cruise control and then the adaptive cruise control. It's almost like they're two different functions, and the way you set and get into those is distinct and unique. Where here in the GM, if you have adaptive cruise control and you turn cruise on and you hit the set button, it pretty much assumes off the bat that you want to be in adaptive cruise mode, and it'll display a message on the screen that if you don't want adaptive cruise and you just want the regular static cruise, that you should cancel out of it at that moment. So that's kind of interesting. I actually like that, because for me, if I'm going to be using cruise control and I have a vehicle with adaptive cruise control, then more than likely I want to be using the adaptive cruise control. You know, I was thinking on my Ram, I don't think I can't think of that many times where I actually use the static cruise control. I mean, almost always I would engage the adaptive cruise control. And so that's kind of neat how GM's bundled and put all that together. It probably makes it just a little bit easier to use. You got less buttons on the steering wheel. So anyways, guys, those are my initial impressions after, you know, being in my Ram 3500 dually for the last 2.5 years and then stepping foot into the 24 GMC Sierra 3/4 ton. Those are the initial things that stood out to me going from one to the next. But I've got a lot of driving here to do, over 500 miles to get home, and so I will check in once I'm further along. But for those curious, as far as what the trip computer in the truck is showing, it is showing an average MPG right now of 11.2, which, you know, again, I barely put 50 miles on the truck so far, so I think that's going to be pretty biased based on the first few miles that were recorded. But this is kind of interesting. The range that it's showing is 581 miles to empty, and the needle is still on the full there, the F. So that tells me that I'm probably getting closer to maybe 18 miles per gallon based on how much range is left. So it'll be kind of interesting to see when it gets closer to fill up where that number sits and how accurate the trip computer is on the truck compared to reality. But so far I'm enjoying the way the truck rides, so hang tight and I'll be back in a little bit with the results on the MPG test. Okay guys, so we are just a little bit under halfway on the gas tank, on the fuel level there. And so I wanted to do just a quick update. So the trip computer is showing 13.3 miles per gallon so far. We're about to cross the Alabama state line, so I'm gonna keep on driving and I'll probably do a fill up here probably once we get just below a quarter on the fuel level there. And I'll mention it again, the wind seems like it's been pretty strong today, so I would imagine that could impact the fuel economy a little bit. And guys, remember, the truck is not broken in. It only has 322 miles on the odometer, and so these results that we're seeing are probably worst case scenario. Like I said before, I'd imagine the fuel economy will get better as the engine is broken in and everything's, you know, worn in nicely. Guys, so I've been driving for almost 7 hours now and we are starting to get low on fuel, so I'll be stopping here in just a little bit. You can see there on the gauge we are below 1/8 of a tank and we're in the red section there. So before we stop though, I wanted to show you what the trip meter is showing on the truck. So trip number 2, I did not reset trip number 2, so you can see it's the life of the truck basically, 472 miles there on the trip meter, and that matches the odometer at 472 as well. So that is the full trip. Now when I left the dealer, there was 8 miles on the odometer, and I forgot to reset it. That's what I should have done. So when I get to the gas station, I'm basically just gonna subtract 8 miles from whatever the odometer is reading. But I did reset trip number 1. You can see there, I did this one about 50 to 60 miles into the trip today. So I think this is a more accurate representation of the average speed so far. You can see 69.2 miles. That sounds about right. You know, I hit some stop and go traffic here and there, but overall I think that's probably pretty close. And it's showing 14.3 miles per gallon. So anyway, we're gonna get to the gas station next, fuel up, and see how we compare against what the computer is showing. All right guys, so the pump just clicked off there. So we're looking at 32.029 gallons of fuel there. And the final number on the odometer was 482. And remember, it was 8 when I left the dealership, so that's 474. So we're gonna say 474 divided by 32.029. And there you have it. 14.799, so basically 14.8 miles per gallon. Well guys, I've got about another 2 hours to go to get back home. And you know, originally I was going to do the whole trip and do an MPG on the whole trip, a little over 500 miles there, but it's getting kind of late and I'm getting a little bit tired. So I think a full fuel tank gives us a pretty good idea of the initial fuel economy. So again, based on the pump, I calculated 14.8 miles per gallon. The trip computer, you can see there, trip number 2, which is the full odometer there, 13.8. Compare that to trip number 1, where I reset that one about 50, 60 miles into the trip, 14.3. So in both cases, the trip computer actually was more pessimistic than what the actual fuel economy ended up being there at the 14.8. And again guys, the engine isn't broken in. I mean, literally 482 miles, that's all that's on the truck. So, you know, to be candid, I was hoping that the MPG number would be just a little bit higher perhaps, you know, going 15 into the 16s even perhaps. But to be fair, I was going, you know, average speed, you can see there, 68.2, and the faster you go, it just doesn't do any favors for your fuel economy. So I think if I'd gone, you know, more 60, 65, probably could get that number up a little bit. And you know, at the beginning of the trip, it was pretty windy too, so that probably impacted a little bit there. But anyways guys, I hope you found this video helpful. If you like videos on trucks and RVs, definitely make sure you're subscribed. And as always, thanks for watching.